Hello and welcome to the Molten Music Technology Research Labs here in Norfolk. I love film music. I love soundtracks, theme songs. The very first album I owned was great war movie themes, and the first single I bought was Ghostbusters. I love the whole genre, the whole soundscape, atmospheric writing for film, for images, for creating these emotions and these stories and telling stories via music. Being a film composer must just be the best gig in the world. So today we're going to do something a bit different. Today we're going to ask a question. Why are rebooted superhero themes so rubbish? My kids are Batman nuts. Actually, it's probably the Lego Batman, but it's Batman all the same. They've been through the Lego Xbox games, they've watched Batman Brave and the Bold, Young Justice, Justice League, they've read Tiny Titans, they've even seen the Batman Forever movie because it's the only age-appropriate one. Through all their Batman consumption, they've never experienced the 1960s Batman. And yet, when you ask them to sing the Batman theme tune, they invariably go, dinner, 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 Batman!
The da-na-na-na-na motif of the Danny Elfman theme for Tim Burton's Batman is compelling, but it doesn't quite stick in the head like the classic Neil Hefti 60s theme tune. And in Hans Zimmer's rebooted reboot Dark Knight theme, you'd be hard-pressed to find any motifs at all. Spider-Man is also worshipped in our house, and despite numerous rebooted animated versions, the kids still somehow get the Simpson movie Spider-Pig joke. And yet they've never seen the 1967 cartoon with the Paul Francis Webster and Bob Harris Spider-Man, Spider-Man theme tune. Does anyone even remember the Danny Elfman music from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man? Well, actually, it sounds a lot like Batman with the same sort of cascading strings. James Horner's theme for the rebooted reboot The Amazing Spider-Man has certainly some grandeur to it, but it's not exactly hummable. Is it simply the power of nostalgia? Are my wife and I imposing our childhood themes upon our kids? Well, I'm certainly responsible for teaching them the theme to Hong Kong Phooey, but when it comes to Batman, any visitor to our house, regardless of age or background, will sing the 1960s theme when the kids show them Batman toys or appear in costume. It's just become part of our culture.
I can give you 4 notes of Joe Harnell's Hulk motif, and an image of Lou Ferrigno just pops into your head. Or the opening notes of The Lonely Man, and you'll see David Banner walking away on down that road. But I can't remember any of the music from either of the Hulk movies. But it's certainly not just a problem with superheroes.
Here's another great example, Battlestar Galactica. We've got this by Stu Phillips and Glenn A. Larson. Or this by Bear McCreary and Richard Gibbs. There's a whole wiki page dedicated to unpicking each nuanced theme in the new Galactica. Maybe there's some kind of inverse law at work, where the more the composers wax lyrical about the depth of their music, the less memorable it becomes. I've watched each season several times, and although it's familiar while watching, I couldn't really hum it if you ask me later. But I can conduct the entire orchestral score of the original just from memory. Hans Zimmer would probably be the patron saint of this inverse law. Call it the Law of Zimmer if you like. There's loads of YouTube videos about the processes he went through when scoring Man of Steel. For the action sequences, he wanted some drums, but rather than just get a drummer in, he got in 10 drummers. They talk at length about the way the different feels and individuality of each drummer influenced and threaded its way through the mix. Honestly, with all the chaos, the frenetic action and all the explosions on screen, the music is just so much noise in the background. On the other hand, all you need is a couple of bars of John Williams' original score for the Chris Reeves Superman, and you are transported with a fluttering heart of heroic endeavour. Michael Giacchino's work on the Star Trek reboot is pretty engaging, but it's only at the end when we get treated to Alexander Courage's original theme from Star Trek that everything seems right again in the universe.
trying to think of recent TV shows with memorable themes. What springs to mind is Lost, or Homeland, or The Americans. But none of those have much music in them at all, and yet their opening titles really nail what the show is about. Compare that to Starsky and Hutch, or Kojak, or Hill Street Blues, Blake Seven, MASH, Doctor Who, $6 Million Man, and so on. Where is the cool theme music these days?
Going for nostalgia can work up to a point. The score to Pixar's The Incredibles is wonderful in its homage to 60s spy movies, but it so quickly becomes overused, and we find the exact same references being used in Batman, The Brave and the Bold, and the more recent Legion of Superheroes. In fact, they're quite hard to tell apart.
Maybe it's a lack of talent or creativity, or maybe is it more likely that it's become too easy and therefore somehow too lazy?
I recall hearing a programme on Radio 4 talking about producing library music in the 60s and 70s, and how amazing musicians would be put together in a BBC studio and work like a 9-to-5 job on producing music that would then be attached to various programmes. Out of many one-take jam sessions, works of genius would appear, like the much celebrated Left Bank 2. Some of their comments about modern library music is that it all seems to be about drones and atmospherics, as opposed to melody. And maybe that hits the nail on the head. Maybe we've lost the ability to write good melody.
When people buy an audio computer from me, one of the most common reasons given is in order to write soundtracks, and it's a very noble and interesting pursuit. All you need is some cinematic strings and a few percussion noises, and you're away. And these are all available in abundance.
At the moment, there are terabytes and terabytes of sample and instrument library out there dedicated to producing cinematic style music. The tools we have at our disposal are simply amazing, to the point where one bloke in a shed can score an entire movie on their computer, and it will sound pretty amazing.
I love writing for film or theatre because it gives you a framework, it gives you a narrative that no other genre does. You've got a story to tell and points to hit and emotions to generate, and that's a much more interesting prospect than a blank sheet of paper. So I'm going to create some instant cinematic music. This sound will be familiar. Sort of the chugging strings that you find in all superhero music, which adds sort of drama and space to things. I'm going to combine that with a big sort of thunderous drum loop. So let's see what that sounds like together. Maybe add some ethnic influences. So our superhero has just visited Istanbul, for instance. This is using Session Strings Pro in Contact, which is a beautifully animated string library. Capable of producing very expressive sounds, and that all can come together very realistically and very quickly, all in your own little home studio. Perhaps there's an orchestral trap that we fall into, in that if we have an orchestra in our computers, then we feel compelled to use it, especially if we want to feel serious and to be taken seriously. So perhaps we end up being too literal, too predictable, and ultimately forgettable.
Who remembers the Avengers music? Marvel have had every opportunity to repeat distinguishable themes at people through their current crop of Avengers and solo superhero films and TV spin-offs. But the only theme I can remember is the one from the excellent Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon by Bad City. Joss Whedon reportedly hired a classical theme composer to write the music for Buffy, but he didn't like it, and he ended up using the rocking track from indie band Nerve Herder. And can you imagine Buffy in any other way? The use of more popular music has a way of transforming a film, but there's an art in getting that right. Quentin Tarantino is probably responsible for rescuing the use of popular culture music from being left behind in the 1980s. And it doesn't get much cooler than Reservoir Dogs. The perfect storm for me was Propellerhead's spy break in The Matrix, a perfect match of visual and aural excitement. Cool title tracks sometimes frustrate me, because so often they find themselves as part of the film's marketing, but only actually appear during the credits right at the very end. The Batman film I mentioned earlier is a good example of this. Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me by U2 is an awesome track, and it could have been amazing if it was threaded throughout the movie rather than relying on Danny Elfman's motif alone, but sadly we only hear it at the end. It's the Bond movies that get this right most often, of course. Starting with an established iconic theme, the tone is then set by the song which is played during the titles at the start. And this triggers familiarity, viewers identify with it, and they carry it through the film. Although sometimes, carrying a theme through a film can go too far.
Another thing that gets up my nose is geographical cliches, where the composer can't help themselves but sneak in some kind of musical reference to the location. So you get Frank Sinatra whenever you see the New York skyline, or Elvis when the lights of Vegas come into view, the automatic banjo that cranks out a tune whenever we visit the yokels up in the hills.
But where it really gets me is in the generalisation of ethnicity. Every time we arrive at an Asian-looking location, we're treated to a slight microtonal inflection to the score. Or maybe a vocal sample from someone like Lisa Gerrard. Lisa's voice seems to be the source of the music for the entire ancient and Aboriginal world, whether that's ancient Greece or Rome or just natives of some unspecified dusty land. Or even the futuristic ethnicity of Battlestar Galactica. We know where we are when we hear Lisa's talented tones. In World War Z, the music by Marco Beltrami ratchets up the tension beautifully throughout the film. It has shades of John Carpenter's Halloween, or at least I think so. But even he could not resist the ethnic influence in the scene in Jerusalem. I'm slightly disappointed that when Brad arrives in Cardiff, we're not treated to a bit of Tom Jones just so that we know where we are.
It happens every day. No matter what you say, you find it happen all the time.
Maybe there's a danger that as computer musicians, we all sit down with the same tools, the same plugins, the same software, the same presets and sample library. Maybe it's because we don't collaborate in the same way that we used to. Or maybe because we play everything through one kind of controller. Or maybe it's because the opportunity is so rare, so unlikely, that when it comes along we tend to play it safe. We go with the established norms, rather than risking our only chance at attaching ourselves to a successful movie.
Predictability can work. Christian and Robert Lopez's Oscar-winning songs in Disney's Frozen are a testament to how there can be a joyfulness in something sounding exactly as it should. Or is it better to be completely out there like Wendy Carlos's scoring of the original Tron movie?
Maybe the small pool of composers, Williams, Elfman, Zimmer, I'm looking at you, maybe they've been scraping the bottom of the creative barrel for so long that there's just really not anything left. And so they have to invent absurd ways of doing things in order to justify the enormous cost. And yet they still manage to produce something which sounds largely the same.
Those chug-in train-like strings seem to appear in every superhero score up to and including Arrow and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We need something like Trent Reznor's sublimely unusual and perfectly pitched score for The Social Network. Composers like John Williams have produced some of the most memorable themes of my lifetime, but I feel it's time to move on. We need more Reznors, more Daft Punk doing Tron, more Sean Callery's Homeland, more Brett McKenzie's Man or Muppet. Something that's going to stand out from the sound of samey cinematic strings. When Buck Rogers finally gets its inevitable reboot, how likely is it that the fabulously whimsical guitar solo will be replaced by some overly worthy strings and thundering percussion? It's the most difficult thing in the world to get that gig. And do we really think it will be because you sound the same as everybody else, but just slightly cheaper?
And, as ever, Lego shows us how to do it properly.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when we live our dream.
Thanks for watching. Now go and make some decent tunes.